Stop.
So,
You've got nothing coming through.
yeah, I guess I can hardly hear it either.
That's because we switched mics. I forgot.
Oh,
There we are. Yeah, a little loud.
Just start over completely. Oh, yeah, it's turned down now.
Yeah, you have to turn it down. It's too loud.
Oh, no wonder your headphones are loud. All right.
All right, there we go.
I'll edit this out. Sorry.
jeez.
Hopefully no one's
This is your first time?
Yeah.
That's what she said.
No. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Break it down.
Back here at the Alive and Social Network, this is The Breakdown, episode number 16. Slow week. Again, this is The Breakdown brought to you by Coors Light. Brandon Warren here joining you from the Alive and Social Network at the Southside Studios in South Minneapolis. And I'm joined by Tom Schreier, producer Aaron, and of course, as always, Cole DeVries. Guys, how are we doing today?
Pretty good.
Can't complain. Is that...
There we go. I think we
There
got
you
Tom
go.
back.
I'm back.
Yeah, we lost Tom for a second there. Tom filling in today for Zach Bennett. A little more news on the Twin side of things, so going to lean on your expertise more today than we might have with Zach. We'll get Zach back in again here in the near future. Coming off a 147-hour hiatus. It's kind of a funny little joke, as I sometimes forget to reset my timer for when we're doing the show. But that does bring me to a point, though, where we are going to go on a bit of a winter hiatus here, take next week off, and maybe the week after that. Thanksgiving that week, but if we can record earlier in the week, we might arrange something. However, a lot of that will be dictated, too, I think, by how much activity the Twins undertake. And so far, through about, how many days have we had of the offseason? Like 7-8 days of the offseason. There's been plenty of Twins activity so far. Yesterday, the Twins traded a guy that actually, Cole, you're very familiar with, Aaron Hicks, to the New York Yankees for catcher John Ryan Murphy. Guys, what was your initial reaction when you heard that the trade was made, and what were you thinking about at that point?
I had no idea that even happened, and my fiance texted me, and she's like, "Did you hear Aaron Hicks was traded?" And I was like, "What?" I mean, that was definitely one that I was not expecting, just because he had finally had kind of his breakout year, I thought, and I figured he was going to be a great guy to anchor down either center field or one of the corner spots. And yeah, it took me by a little bit of surprise. I didn't see him going, and so yeah, that was kind of my reaction to it.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too. I thought they kind of had the outfield solidified. The big question was where Kepler fit in. If he was the fourth outfielder, if you had to sign kind of a veteran just as insurance for Buxton or whatever. My first reaction is hopefully not doing the same thing to Buxton that they did to Hicks, thrusting him into the center field position,
Right.
asking him to be a leadoff hitter, a guy who's going to be making an impact with his bat when he really didn't last year.
Completely. That was my first thing that kind of surprised me about it, is that it seemed like they were finally getting back to an outfield where they had Span and Revere, one that, two guys that played behind me when I was pitching, and I absolutely loved it because those guys ran down just about everything. And now you have two guys that are equally as fast, if not maybe even a little bit faster than both of them, in Hicks and Buxton, and you're getting rid of one of those guys that had definitely the better year out of the two of them. And it's kind of like, are we going back to that position where we had a great outfield, and then for years we've been struggling to get back to a good outfield. Now we finally had a really good outfield again. And it was kind of like, what's going on here? I realized that we need a catcher, but I feel like we should have made a different trade.
Yeah, I feel like everyone was kind of dreaming on that outfield of Rosario and Buxton and Hicks at some point into the future as a maybe a potentially at least medium, maybe even long-term solution to still a rotation that puts a lot of balls in play, has a lot of fly ball guys in the Phil Hugheses and the Glenn Perkins, obviously in the bullpen, but they don't have as many ground ball heavy guys as you might like if you're not going to be striking people out, and so you do need guys that can go get it. Part of what we'll discuss too in this segment is replacements in these positions. They still don't necessarily have to go to Buxton in center field. They could put Eddie Rosario out there. Another name that people brought up that I think a lot of people are forgetting about, Danny Santana could go back out there. Obviously, I see that look you're giving me, Tom. He was a train wreck at the plate last year, and he was basically the polar opposite. For as good as he took and kind of stormed the league in 2014, excuse me, for as well as he stormed the league and was fantastic, Rookie of the Year candidate and all that stuff, is just horrible last year. Tried to put him back at shortstop. That didn't go well either. He's out of options going into spring training next year, so he does have to make the team or be, obviously shipped off. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and two, that's one thing I'm going to want to get into as we move through this discussion, just based on the number of different moving pieces that the Twins have also shipped out. Another trade, and I think maybe another guy that you could possibly be familiar with, Chris Herman being shipped to the Diamondbacks for an outfielder, I believe plays a little first base too, Daniel Palka. First inclination or indication with Palka, a power guy, strikes out a lot. Might be a fun guy to see in the same lineup as Adam Brett Walker. From a skill standpoint, doesn't strike out quite as much, doesn't hit for quite as much power. There is some worry he doesn't really have a defensive spot. But to get even a semi-useful player for Herman, whose big league game tape has not really been great, I think was a good move for the Twins. It also cleared a 40-man roster spot.
Definitely, I thought that was a good move. One that it's kind of tough saying this because I like Chris and I played with him for a while, but I was kind of surprised at how much time he spent,
how much rope he got.
Yeah, with the team, with really not ever producing hitting wise. He was always. I thought his game progressed immensely in the catching role with him starting out as an outfielder and kind of doing both roles. So I thought he did a great job with that. But yeah, he just was really lackluster with the offense.
Yeah, and I mean he had a nice season at AAA a couple years ago. His development was weird in that I think it was stunted when he was forced to be brought up maybe a little earlier than the Twins would have liked. And he good minor league numbers, good discipline, pretty good contact. I feel like his trademark hit with the Twins was rolling it between first and second. Like that was the one thing he just was always good for, and that was like probably half of his base hits. But I always thought there was some potential there to be at least a decent backup. And the nice thing too with position versatility between a catcher and outfielder is he's doing things that you might need two players to otherwise do. The issue is the bat never picked it up, and so anyway, at the end of the four seasons that he's played, you look at the results and you're like, wow, in retrospect, he got, like you said, a lot of playing time and not much in the way of results.
Yeah, I think the one takeaway here is at least they're developing players and trading them and getting value. I mean, Hicks would be a bigger example than Herman, but in year past, you developed a player and dropped him off on a coast, right?
Yeah, well, I think I still think Twitter fans or social media, Twins fans on social media still have this overwhelming view of, okay, Twins are going to develop somebody and then they just go play somewhere else, which is like, okay, well, who was the last, really great Twins free agent to go play somewhere else where the Twins are like, I would really like to keep him. They traded Johan Santana. And if you look at Johan's numbers, they were much better in Minnesota than they were with the Mets.
Oh, that was a great trade.
Never played
for them.
He never played in the playoffs with the Mets. And granted, the Twins frittered away their return by not getting the most out of Gomez, not getting the most out of Hardy from that. But the idea that they traded him at a good time to get value for him makes sense. Even if they didn't necessarily pick the trade that we would look at now as the best. The Red Sox maybe were offering Jed Lowry and John Lester. We'll never know. But to get out while the getting was good, that's kind of what the Twins' budget made them do back in the Metrodome days was you didn't have a chance to really grow attached to players because you knew they weren't going to be able to stick around. Who knew Torrey Hunter, when the Twins let him walk at age 32, had 8 more years left? Like you don't suspect it. Even guys that keep themselves in great shape just fall off the planet. Torrey Hunter and Vernon Wells were having careers that were pretty similar, and Wells has been a non-entity now for 3, 4, 5 years, whereas Hunter just kept on going. So it's hard to know when guys are going to keep going. And so I guess what I'm coming around full circle here is like, now that the Twins have the money to keep some of the guys that they want to keep, they've kind of come down this era of then no longer creating those players. So this is uncharted territory where the Twins have the money to keep Trevor Plouffe if they decide to. that's going to be an interesting factor the rest of this offseason.
Well, or hopefully Buxton, Sano, Rosario.
And the other thing is Mauer's contract will expire by the time they ever have to pay a Buxton or a Sano or anybody else, a Barrios. So a lot of things right now that maybe people are worrying about, I think, is just unreasonable fear. I don't think they have to worry about if the Twins can keep Miguel Sano into the future.
I think you're right.
And that's one of the reasons why I was kind of surprised that the Aaron Hicks trade happened, because this was a player that it seemed like you were just starting to get value for.
Right. First round pick too.
Yeah.
And the Twins have been so hesitant with like Parmalee to let him go as a first round pick. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, and I mean, this just seemed like a quick, hey, get out of here kind of thing. Yeah, when I felt like he was really just starting to come around and was going to had the potential for the next couple of years to be a decent impact player for them, and now we'll see what the Yankees do with him.
And let's talk a little bit about the return. John Ryan Murphy used to go by JR, has lengthened it out. I guess the opposite of shortening it, but Twins fans will remember, hit that home run off of Glenn Perkins at Target Field, one of his, I think, 3 home runs this season. Hasn't gotten much of a chance in New York because of this Brian McCann guy, who turns out he's pretty good. They're starting catcher. They do have some other prospects coming up, Gary Sanchez and Austin Romine. Is it Austin or Andrew? I get the Romines mixed up, but there's one in Detroit and one in New York. But anyway, kind of a squeeze at the catcher position. So for the Twins to get this guy, there is some belief he can round into a future starting catcher. He's only 24, so there is some youth in his favor now too. I think he's 2 years younger than Aaron Hicks is. The big thing for him, I believe he came to catching late in the game. I don't think he was developed as a catcher as a very young boy, but he seems to be rounding into an above-average catcher with good contact skills, not a ton of power, but his approach this year looked like he hit lefties for power and righties more for average or on-base percentage. There might be something here, but the issue with it for me was it felt like Hicks has a higher ceiling and the Twins are kind of taking the safer player. It feels like kind of a Twins thing to do to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I would have much rather them traded someone else on the 40-man roster.
I thought Rosario, no on-base percentage. The way the game is going now with guys taking walks and playing really good defense, I feel like Rosario's skill set is pretty slim for him to sustain that forever, especially given how much film there is on guys that swing at everything.
Yeah.
So with Hicks, I felt like there was still untapped potential, but a lot of people are quick to point. And Tom, you said you wrote a lot about him recently, so I'll be interested in your perspective too. A lot of people say he was like great in July, or 1 month this year he was really good, and the rest was just kind of weak. So if you look at it that way, well, then maybe you're onto something. I thought the tools flashed louder than they had at any point. The batted balls that he put in play, he hit harder. The defense looked better. The running was, he was on base more to actually do some running.
Yep.
The fielding, he obviously has a gun. He was one of like 9 players in the big leagues to be recorded at 100 miles per hour from the outfield. Now, the throws that he did were horrible, like just airmail, the worst throws you can imagine. But the raw physical tools are there that it does make you wonder if this could be another Carlos Gomez situation.
Yeah, you worry that with Hicks, I always wondered if he needed a change of scenery, that they kind of messed up the development enough that he needed to go somewhere outside of Minnesota to kind of really take off. And you worry that going to a situation like the Yankees, where they have a history of really doing well with players there, obviously, given their past success, he goes to be an all-star, and does that put pressure on Murphy, who now it would be expected to be a starting catcher? That would be fair return for that player.
For me, too, the other thing is that Hicks's struggles in the big leagues have been hitting right-handed pitching as a left-handed hitter. If he can start hooking a few more balls into the stands at Yankee Stadium, which is comically small in right field, then you start to expand on that skill set, continue to hit left-handed pitching well. I still do believe, I believe he's 26. He's not at that point where he can't become a better player. There's still that glimmer of hope that he can be a star, but at the very least, he's a competent big league center fielder. So what Keith Law said was, basically, this was a trade that benefited both sides. Twins needed a catcher. The Yankees needed an outfielder. It's going to get Jacoby Ellsbury moved or taken off the field a little bit, which is absurd with his contract. But it was a beneficial trade for both sides.
You certainly hope so, and I think the Twins needed a catcher. That's the bottom line. The surprising thing here too is Molitor is trying to cut down on strikeouts. They're going and getting a Korean player who strikes out a lot. They have
Yeah, we'll
Rosario.
talk about him too.
Yeah, they have Rosario who's striking out a lot. Hicks would be your kind of disciplined. Even when he wasn't playing well, he was disciplined at the plate. He was known for drawing walks in the minors, and that's kind of the surprise too. You hope that, not intentionally, of course, but the management isn't working against the manager, because I think that's the right approach. I think what the Royals showed us this year is that their guys hit fastballs above 95 miles per hour, hit for contact very well, especially in, loaded counts or whatever. So I think that's the kind of team you want to build up. And so you want a player like Aaron Hicks who's going to draw walks, who's going to take pitches, stuff like that. Rosario's issue, why people think he'll regress, is that he swings at everything.
Yeah.
And so when he makes contact, it's awesome. When he doesn't, he looks foolish, especially against Sales and these pitchers.
The more modern player takes walks. I mean, it's just kind of the way the game is going. Now, you don't have to strictly adhere to the way the game is going. The Twins don't with their bullpen necessarily yet, with all the strikeouts or anything. So, there's not one guaranteed path to success. Everybody wants to replicate the Royals bullpen. I mean, how are you going to do that? How are you going to get 5 guys throwing 95, 96 miles an hour? So, I mean, I don't think you can. It's not a copycat league like people say about the NFL. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And you're completely right where it's everyone wants to recreate these certain aspects of the game that other teams have. But it's like, again, how are you going to do that? How are you going to get the same bullpen that the Royals have? I mean, that's just things working out and working together, because any 2 or 3 of those guys could have blowing their arm out or something. Like, there's just so many things that go wrong in the course of a season and in the course of a player's career that you can't account for.
Or like trying to mimic the Cardinals, who recently signed Eric Fryer, an old friend, to a minor league deal. Get that news out there too.
I think Tom Verducci wrote a really good piece on the World Series where he basically said, look, it's not just the Royals, like, on paper, or the numbers they produce. It's the team chemistry they had, and understanding that, I take a walk, someone else is going to, bat me over or something like that. And I think the joy of baseball is that exactly, it's not a copycat league. It's not like the NFL where you kind of see everyone trying to do similar things. I think it's cool that you can have a power hitting team that has success, or you can have, you have these teams like Detroit that go all in, or you have an A's that kind of works with this minimal budget and continues to have success. The Royals with their contact hitting. I mean, I think especially now, baseball has become more fascinating just because you can win in different markets with different kinds of players. And it's interesting seeing how a GM goes about trying to create, I guess, put their own stamp on managing a team. Or whatever.
And speaking of that, you would kind of tease the Twins going after a Korean slugger. I believe we came to the consensus that it's Young Ho Park. I don't know if the B is silent or not. We'll for sure be schooled on that in the future. But the Twins, with the winning bid on a guy who has hit in the last 4 seasons 31, 37, 52, and 53 home runs in the KBO. Again, the KBO it's certainly not up to snuff with the big leagues. It's where Andrew Albers went and pitched after the Twins moved on from him. He's resurfaced a little bit in the Blue Jays system and all that too, but there's mixed levels of success. I believe Jung Ho Kang, the Rookie of the Year finalist for the Pirates, had come from that league too. There was plenty of worry about how Kong would handle high-end velocity, swing and miss potential, and all that stuff. The same things that are going to dog Park until he proves he can. But the Twins have paid a pretty big price for a guy in terms of bidding. I believe it was like $12 million and change to negotiate with this guy. And at 29 years old, he's basically got to be who he is. He's not going to the minors to develop either. The things that people bring up are a logjam for the corners. I believe he's supposed to be a decent first baseman. He can't really play left field. So you already had that logjam, which is starting to clear out with some trades and all that. But first base, Joe Mauer's there. What do you guys envision from this guy, both from an adaptation standpoint and from a playing time standpoint, when it comes to Joe Mauer and maybe Kenny Vargas, Josmio Pinto, who might not catch anymore, all those things?
That's one thing that I didn't understand with them trying to secure this guy at all. Is you've got Joe there, you've got Kenny Vargas, like you're talking about Pinto,
Arcia.
Arcia. If they decide to keep Plouffe, what are they going to do with Sano with DH? Are they going to try him at first base?
Well, they talked about him in the outfield too, and that'll probably spill into our second segment, is the trickle down effect of all this.
Yeah, so there's conceivably 5 players that we're talking about that need decisions need to be made on in the next year or two, and it's an unbelievable logjam. And I was just I was surprised that they went after this guy with so many options.
Is the writing on the wall for Joe Mauer as a regular player?
I think so. I mean, and unless he has a breakout season.
A Justin Morneau in Coors Field resurgence from his concussion stuff.
Yeah, I think then Joe will be back on track. But I mean,
the odds of that aren't very high at 33.
No, and Joe unfortunately just hasn't had. He's had okay seasons, but he hasn't had Joe Mauer seasons.
And the issue too, again, playing first base, he's never going to catch again. We can't emphasize that enough. At first base, the achievement curve is just higher.
Yeah, and I think the expectation is he gets on base because you look at it, you talked about
he's
Vargas
one of the 9 best guys at hitting. He's one of the 9 best hitters on the Twins, and so by that virtue, he still plays.
Well, that's what Mulder kind of said at the Hunter press conference. He was like, "Look, people dog me for hitting him third. He was the highest average and highest on base percentage, I believe, on the Twins last year, other than maybe Sano."
Well, Sano, but sample size and all that.
Yeah. So I think. What he's saying is he's still one of the best hitters. He needs to be an elite hitter, though, and I'm not talking power. I'm talking getting on base, especially in today's game, in order to justify being at first base. And in some ways, maybe it's not a terrible thing to put pressure on that corner spot, even though that's going to always be there, because really you don't need a everyday DH or first baseman. You could rotate your best hitters through there, especially to give them an off day if you want to have them in the outfield or whatever. So, the surprise is really the strikeouts, because as much as you get excited about the meat of that order, the issue with Sano, Vargas, and then this
161 strikeouts and 622 plate appearances for this guy. So that's in a lower league. That's like maybe between double and triple A.
And Mauer struck out 112 times last year. I mean, that's a career high for him too. Yep. So, hopefully Mulder, I like the mindset he has that I'm not going to accept this trend of strikeouts, but hopefully he has a plan in place. I mean, if in many ways, this puts a lot of pressure on the manager to be like, okay, you have to implement your plan, get with Bernansky and assure that, this team's not whiffing at an astronomical rate.
I think the most annoying thing is what was the comparisons to Nishioka. It's like, you hit your head on the microphone, but okay, here's the gist. Like, people are like, oh, that's so racist. Like, I don't think it's racist. I think it's just stupid. Like people,
how is that? How is it even racist?
Yeah, not knowing the difference between Korea and Japan. I don't think it's racist. I think it's just ignorant. I think it's just stupid. And then to compare a guy who's a slight middle infielder to a power hitting first baseman is another level of dumb. And then it's not like these guys are related. So there's like elevating levels of stupidity here. And the most recent thing that I can remember of this phenomena, and the reason why I don't call it racist is because I think it's just being a lazy, stupid sports fan, was when the Vikings drafted Sidney Rice out of South Carolina, and everyone said, oh, he's going to be another Troy Williamson because he went to South Carolina too. And it's like, are they brothers? Are they, do they have anything even remotely related?
Well, I mean, that sounds like the exact same thing.
It's just lazy.
Is that because both these players are from Asian leagues that, they're going to have the exact same problems. And I mean, come on.
Well, they're like, list some players that had success coming over from the Asian leagues, like Ichiro, Hideki Matsui, Hideo Nomo. There's countless players that had at least some level of success. $12 million in today's game is not a huge deal. He's probably going to sign like a 4-year deal worth $27 million. Again, not an obscene amount of money to take a chance. Like, everybody acts like the Nishioka signing crippled the Twins. It was the cascade effect of trading J.J. Hardy for nothing while he turns it on in Baltimore that hurts you more than the fact that you went and got Nishioka and the money spent.
To be clear, 2 different leagues too. I mean, the issue, the one parallel you could draw here is if you have an issue with the Twins' international scouting, because I guess that would be kind of the common bond. But my assumption is that they have different people in different leagues and are gathering information differently.
Well, I think the Japanese league is actually better than the Korean league, to be honest with you. But you know what? Different players come from different leagues and perform differently. That's I actually tweeted as we wrap up the first segment here, an advanced, detailed scouting report, and then I did the shrug emoji because we don't know. But we are running late, so let's pause quick. We'll come back. I think that part of this is going to bleed into the second segment, but we got a lot more Twins talk to get to on the breakdown. Brought to you by Coors Light.
Hey everybody, my name is Joan Vorderbruggen, and I want you to tune into my new weekly podcast, Joan of Art, on the Alive and Social Network. Each week on Joan of Art, we will interview some of the most talented artists from across the Twin Cities. I'm talking painters, costume designers, filmmakers, poets, There's going to be something for everybody. You won't believe some of the things people are making.
598,000 light brights.
Takuma created the world's largest light bright.
Right.
So I know that there's a piece that you're working on.
It's called How to Have Fun in a Civil War. A friend of mine's like, you're bringing Civil War to the state fair.
You can find the Joan of Art podcast at www.aliveandsocial.com or look on Facebook for Joan of Art podcast. Tune in weekly to Joan of Art as we investigate and celebrate people who make art.
All right, we're back here on The Breakdown. Story North celebrates the storytelling arts, hosted by author and University of Minnesota creative writing professor Kim Todd, public radio producer and host of the Twin Cities' biggest and best book club, Books and Bars, Jeff Common, and blogger and journalist Jay Stevens. Story North will mull, wrestle, and have fun with any art form containing narrative, including novels, film, television, comics, games, and theater, and with special emphasis on the Twin Cities' vibrant literary community. That's Story North, Thursdays at 3 p.m. on the Alive and Social Network. So we went a little long with the first segment, and I think it's good. I think it means that we're fired up about this first little off-season bunch of action for the Twins. The one thing I wanted to get to in the first segment, and we'll just jump on it now, is I guess the lead into it. Miguel Sano, there's rumors he could play outfield. I keep hearing left or right conflicting. Local people seem to be saying left. National people seem to be saying right. What do you guys think of him in the outfield at all?
I think he has no business being out there. He's a third baseman.
Right.
And this is one thing that drove me nuts when I was playing in the Twins system is how they seem to love to take these guys that already have a solidified position. And then because for whatever reason, I mean, this one's obviously they don't want to give up Trevor Plouffe if that's what they're going for. But, then it's like, well, let's see how he does over here. And it's like, no. What other teams do you see do this where they throw guys all over the field and be like, okay, well, he's marginal here. Let's have him play here and see how good he gets outside of having him play his original position and be really good at that or the best that he can. It makes no sense to me, and it kind of irritates me.
Is this posturing by the Twins to keep value for Trevor Plouffe?
I think that might be part of it.
I think it's a huge part. I
Yeah.
think Sano is athletic enough to be Delman Young, Josh Willingham, which is obviously something you should aspire to be better than. But
That's not saying much.
Like his first big league,
two. Let's be honest.
Like his first big league triple, though, he reached 20 miles per hour on the bases. I mean, that's
That's
cruising.
moving.
I mean, but that's not necessarily Reed's instincts, playing the ball off the wall, all the finer points of the outfield.
And he's never had to do any of those. Right. And you're expecting him to go from 0 to big league ready in spring training time?
The devil's advocate here, though, is Alex Gordon was a third baseman. He became the best left fielder in the game. So it's not unthinkable, but
different body build.
Yeah. that's 100% accurate. I wonder if it isn't just posturing. He's going to practice out there in the Dominican League. He's not going to play out there. I think they want to move Plouffe, or have some kind of answer on Plouffe. I guess would be the better answer, like some solidification. Because the other option would have been to move Plouffe to the outfield. He was a very good outfielder. The issue is Plouffe is a very good third baseman now.
Yeah,
and to sort of move your best third base option off the position to accommodate the hot shot, you create some issues there from maybe a morale standpoint, from a logic standpoint. But at the same point is like, if Sano can't handle it, then what do you do? Because you probably can't move him back to DH with Park in the house. You're not moving Mauer because you haven't to this point. There's a lot of moving pieces here.
The issue I always had is when they said they wouldn't move Mauer to the outfield, and now, I mean, I understand it's the same thing, different body type. It probably wouldn't work out.
He's a
great.
really stiff athlete now too. Mauer is he has no fluidity in his motions. I don't think.
But I would go through like the guys they'd put in the outfield: Nunez, who was not good in the outfield; Chris Colabello, who's not good in the
Escobar.
outfield; Dumit or whatever, who had like 3 errors on that one play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like they didn't take it seriously. Now I know Danny Santana would be the outlier, who actually they moved to the outfield. And
He was fine. He really was. He really was
there.
okay.
But it's funny that, as you said earlier, like you had this solidified outfield before, and I understand why. You maybe bite on trying to get a catcher. I understand the mentality there, but let's not completely like throw the outfield out the window now. You know what I mean?
Baby
like
out with the bathwater.
Yeah, exactly. And so maybe the move is they're trying to move Plouffe, get like a good outfielder. The other thing is my radical theory here would go nuts and go get Cespedes or
Hayward.
Yeah, like go get one of those guys.
Nobody in baseball. You guys can call me crazy. You can call me weird. Nobody in baseball wears a uniform better than Jason Hayward. That guy looks amazing. You know what? It's not anything more than just an aesthetics thing. It's just that guy wore the hell out of that baseball uniform. Like you watch him play, you're just like, and maybe it was the Cardinals with the two birds on each side of the chest and the real snappy looking jerseys.
Great uni.
But it's just like, man, and not only that, but he's a great player. I mean, he would be underappreciated in Minnesota because Twins fans don't appreciate how great Joe Mauer was, and Hayward does the same thing. He's defense. He's getting on base, but he doesn't hit for a ton of power. But he's just a really polished, really nice player. And at an age of like 26, you never see those guys in free agency. Like that's why there's a talk of him getting $200 million. So, while you want to dream of a Cespedes or a Hayward, do you guys think all of this is posturing and they might go outside the organization for an outfielder?
Man, I really have no idea what
Denard Span is the name I keep coming back to. Free agent, no qualifying offer. Obviously, I think he liked his time in Minnesota. I think Minnesota was good to him. I think he was good in Minnesota. I don't know. He probably wants a 3, 4, 5-year deal. I mean, I don't think he's going to get 5, but maybe 3 or 4. He's 30. He'll be 32 this 31 or 32 coming up this. I think he's going to be 32. And so you don't want to go overextend yourself, especially with outfield depth coming up, but is it an option?
I think Denard's a decent option that can kind of maybe take on a little bit of a Torrey Hunter role.
He can play center too.
Yep, he can do that, but I think he's a good guy. Everyone likes him. Torrey's a little more outspoken just from, seeing kind of Torrey in interviews and that. And then, I know Denard decently well. So I think Torrey's a little bit more outspoken, but I think it could be a good person to bring in to kind of fill that void in the clubhouse. And the thing that I was kind of surprised is with shipping off Aaron Hicks, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't try to trade Plouffe to another team to get a catcher or something like that.
Because they still could.
Yeah. But
now what do you need? Relief help? You don't want to trade Plouffe for a reliever.
Yeah. And so that's what I was kind of surprised that Hicks got moved instead of Plouffe, and I was just kind of surprised on that side of it.
I suppose the one argument is you're not getting a 24-year-old catcher for Trevor Plouffe.
Maybe not. You just don't know because the Yankees don't need third base help with Chase Headley either. So
yeah, and that's the other thing where I was.
But the Angels do, and I believe they have a catcher that some people like too, whose name I think it's Perez.
Yeah,
Carlos Perez maybe or something. And
right.
So I'm sure that they did their due diligence, and it's just surprising they pulled the trigger the way they did. If you address outfield, to switch gears here, if you do address outfield, do you? I mean, from the outside, does it have to be someone who can play center or not necessarily? Because you do have Buxton who's going to be there. You do have Santana who can play out there in Rosario. So are you just looking for the best fit, or do you need a guy who can do a certain skill set?
I think you need a guy that steps into center field right now, but maybe in a year or two when hopefully Buxton is at full speed and fully big league ready, that whoever this player is can very easily move to right or left field and fill that void. I think that is 100% what they need.
Yeah, how is Denard Span? I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but how is Span not the right guy?
It's because you have to sign him to a long-term deal. So there are some short-term options.
But he could move to the corner. That's, I guess, the bigger point.
Because, I mean, if you wanted to go short-term, you're obviously not going to sound like an Alex Gordon, but, you're looking at the David Murphys, Gerardo Parras, the Travis Snyders. It's a kind of an uninspiring list. If you're going short-term in center, it's really uninspiring. You're like Drew Stubbs. And then Norichika Aoki, the guy that played for the Giants, though, there's some intrigue there. He played right field for the Royals the year that they lost the World Series 2 years ago. That's a guy who at 34 might take a 1-year deal. Needs to rebuild his value after battling with some concussion issues at the end of last season. But there are some options to go lower end. Do you want a guy on a multi-year deal? Do you want a guy on a 1-year deal? Do you want a guy that can play center? There's a lot of factors to consider here.
It's if you think Kepler's like going to be.
That's the other thing, and so
that's it.
when we talk about the chips falling into place, yeah, where does Kepler play into this? This is a guy who won the Southern League MVP, AA. So some guys can jump from AA, but his evolution has been so sudden. I don't think the Twins want to have him make a big jump after becoming such an accomplished AA player. So I think he'll spend a fair amount of time at AAA. But you don't want to block him off either. I think that might have been part of what loomed with this Hicks decision was, we got more guys coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the 4-year span deal, the first year he's center field, hopefully Buxton takes over his position. And I think it's good for young players
but
that
can
actually...
Span hit enough to play in a corner for you? Because that was the issue with Hicks.
Yeah.
If Hicks isn't in center, he might not hit enough to play a corner. I don't believe you need to shoehorn guys into certain roles based on how they hit. You just need 9 guys who can hold their own. You know, the Royals don't have traditional play. Alex Rios was garbage this year, and maybe it had something to do with J.R. Graham hitting him and messing up his whole season. However, you don't have to fit a team into a certain way. If you got 3 speedy outfielders that can chase it down, you're going to save as many runs as you might have scored with plotters in the corners driving those guys in on the other side of the game.
Oh, 100%.
You could relate to that too as a fly ball pitcher. You know, you probably want guys who have some speed on the base paths and then can help you in the defensive side.
Yeah, because my view on that was always, I would rather have the speed guys that aren't going to hit the home runs, that are going to snag down the balls, save guys from going from first to third on me, all those kind of things, because it's a lot easier to pitch when you have a 0-0 ball game or 1-0 or whatever, or 1-0, than if all of a sudden you're down 3-4 runs because guys are taking extra bases,
right.
Not making a little bit above routine catches.
Well, there were times Eddie Rosario would make plays and he would cut across from left to center. You'd be like, whoa, Josh Willingham wasn't making that play. And the issue with fly balls like that is they result in lots of bases. You know, you screw up a play in the infield, it's guy on first. So, like, the issues with outfield play can snowball really fast,
Yep.
especially if there's guys on base, too, because then they're picking up extra bases besides. So, I guess, to come full circle, the one thing I want to ask you, Cole, was, so if you could choose to be a teammate with Ben Revere or Willingham, you're probably leaning towards Revere?
Oh, 100%.
Even the year that Willingham hit 35 bombs?
Oh, I was wondering if you're going to throw that one in there.
I have to.
That
keep you on your toes.
That's...
I think you still take Revere. I think
that's
I would.
the one that makes it tough, because especially me being the pitcher that I am, I have to have the guy in the outfield that's making Sports Center catches every couple of nights.
And that's the way. That's the reason why you can't build teams that are copycats. Is no other team has a Cole DeVries. So like if you're the the number 3 starter on a team, somebody else might have you as the number 2, somebody else have you as the number 5, and then the other guys dictate what type of defense you need, they dictate what type of offense you need. That's why I don't buy the copycat scenario that you need to replicate other teams' success, because you also look at the teams that succeed in the playoffs and like they all have drastically different layouts.
Exactly.
No, and at the same point, I think Molitor's right to cut down on strikeouts. I think sometimes if you can be ahead of the curve on something like that, that's the leg up you get, especially here where they're not outspending people.
Well, and we are at a point in Major League Baseball, I say we just from me viewing this standpoint, where strikeouts are not indicative of lack of talent necessarily. In Little League they are. In high school, guys that strike out a lot might not be very good. In the big leagues, if you were to look at a list of strikeouts, you're probably also going to see guys that are really good because of opportunity. You can't strike out a lot unless you play a lot. So it's a weird thing that I think gets lost on the average fan, because they want to believe that their playing time and their experience is normative. Like, I struck out a lot because I was a terrible player, so all the big leaguers that strike out a lot are really bad players too. So I think that gets kind of lost in transition. Like, Mike Trout strikes out a lot. So I'm always a little uneasy when teams want to go to less strikeouts or better defense or more speed. Like, more speed was the reason the Twins went from J.J. Hardy to Nishioka. And I was like, Hardy was a great defensive shortstop based on instincts, positioning, and a strong arm. Like, he wasn't he doesn't move fast. Did you put J.J. Hardy at all?
No.
You must have missed him. You must have missed him by a couple years.
He was rehabbing with us for a little while in AAA when I was there.
But great defensive shortstop, and so I get nervous when teams want to do wide sweeping philosophical changes. Like, you got 25 guys, you can't make them all do what you want them to do. So it's kind of funny to see the Twins going in another direction with bringing in strikeout guys. But then it's like, don't change them. Don't make them the David Ortiz go the other way thing that we keep hearing about. And like, it just kind of makes you cringe because guys are who they are, and you got to kind of just tailor your training to them.
Yeah, you have to work with whatever the player has currently. And, with kids that I give baseball lessons to, I know that this is kind of completely different, but somewhat similar. That's the same thing I do. I just try to work with what they have because who they are is who they are. And you can try to adjust that a little bit. But when you start trying to get player A to play like player B, it just doesn't work out because you can't do that.
Let's do this. Let's pause quick. We'll come back and just revisit this because it's running long, but it's really good discussion. So we'll take our final pause here, and when we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more. I want to ask you guys about the catching position and what you guys think the outfield is going to look like at the end of next year. So join us for the third segment on The Breakdown, brought to you by Coors Light.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back online, along comes this hit show.
Do you want to do this? I will do this.
Gaby, let's not battle our guests.
You're being nice.
Yeah. In a world full of hit shows, this one's the real deal.
I'm refusing to engage in an argument that doesn't exist.
I'm not arguing.
Twin Cities Hit Show.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. Hey,
See, this is how fights start on pedal pubs. This is exactly he's just all that redheaded anger just came up. It's all in his chest right now.
The Twin Cities Hit Show airs live daily, 9:30 to 10:30 on the Alive and Social Network.
Oh, Shannon, welcome to my world.
Like to let those bumper songs breathe a little bit. It's always a little bit of fun to show off our personalities. As you might guess, Cole chose that one. But
what do you mean, as my guess?
I don't know. That was a lot of fun, though. And one of my favorite parts of the show is just kind of having a little bit of personality with it. So with that in mind, we're going to kind of spill over from the first and second segment of this off-season discussion, and I want to jump right into it with catching. I think, well, first of all, I want to know what you guys think. I mean, is John Ryan Murphy going to be the starter from day one, or do you think it's going to be something he's going to have to steal from Kurt Suzuki?
I think he's going to have to take it over just because I think it would look pretty bad if the guy that you just traded for, who wasn't a starting catcher, you instantly insert him as the starting catcher over your guy who has been your starting catcher for the last couple of years.
Making $6 million too.
Yeah. I think there's going to be some animosity going around in the clubhouse if that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. And the other thing too is the Twins would look like a train wreck if you bring a guy in, he doesn't have success. You go to your $6 million guy who you gave an extension to, he doesn't have success, and then all of a sudden you go, man, you just traded away Aaron Hicks, who probably is doing well in New York. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said about going to the young guy, the old guy, the young. You have to have a certain order of operations for these kind of things, because if you jerk a young guy around too much, it screws him up too. So there's definitely a certain procedure. I think you'll see a timeshare at first, and then if Murphy plays better, outplays Suzuki, he could wrestle the job away from him. I think that's probably what the Twins are somewhat secretly hoping for. Suzuki's a nice backup catcher. I don't know that you'd want to pay your backup catcher $6 million. In today's game, maybe $3-4 million. A.J. Pierzynski just signed a deal, and that was another guy the Twins were rumored to be going after. He signed with the Braves, re-signed with them for, I believe, $3 million. You'd be hard pressed to tell me that I wouldn't rather have A.J. Pierzynski for $3 million than Kurt Suzuki for $6 million.
Boy, he's a guy who always seems to put together a decent season.
And he makes tons of contact, and that's huge.
He is from pitching against him, he is a hard guy to strike out. I mean, he just he is. Like you said, he always makes contact. He's always there nicking a ball just so you can't get him. And
pretty good pop, even at age 40.
Yeah, and he's a guy. How is he still catching at age 40? I mean, what are his knees going to be like in 10 years? Like, I almost feel bad for him right now because. Are you going to be able to walk?
Look, I think he caught like 120 plus games for like 12 years running now or something crazy. I mean, it's legitimately some Iron Man stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's a genetic anomaly, definitely.
Well, I thought the Twins were going to be in on him, and regardless of whether or not this Murphy thing came up first, or if they had a pretty good idea that Pierzynski wanted to stay in Atlanta, I don't know why. Atlanta stinks, but for whatever reason, he wanted to go there, just like Torrey wanted to come here. Reasons are reasons, and so I thought the Twins would be in on Pierzynski, but this was a surprising deal. I hope Murphy can develop into the kind of starter they expect him to. Again, to kind of reiterate, pretty good power against lefties, pretty good approach against righties, and apparently defense. He continues to improve to the point where he's a pretty good pitch framer, good at presenting the pitch to the umpire.
There we go.
Good defense in terms of throwing guys out and improving. Good strong arm. I think blocking is something he'll have to work on, but. And I don't think it's a high standard for him to get past Kurt in those respects. Kurt was the worst catcher in baseball at throwing out runners this year.
Yeah, I think there's he needs to take it over, and I think again it's good for a young player to be maybe put in a position where it's not given to them, but they also have plenty of runway to go if they really take off. One thing to point out here is they are paying $6 million to a backup catcher. So this narrative that the Twins are so cheap they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
I like that we're moving more to are the Twins making smart moves than are the Twins
based on
just being
sunk costs
yes.
too.
Yeah.
And they need to keep him away. If he has the same number of plate appearances next year as he did this year, his vesting option at $6 million for next year will not vest. I think he needs 485 plate appearances, and he had like 477 or something this year. So he played an awful lot this year. Keep in mind his backups were Eric Fryer and Chris Herman. The odds of him playing even more this year are slim to none. But that does also bring me to another point. With Eric Fryer signing with the Cardinals, with Chris Herman being traded to the Diamondbacks, there's 3 catchers on the Twins' 40-man roster right now, and that third guy nobody's talking about is Josmiel Pinto. What happens with him now? Out of options, too, after in spring training, I believe.
I mean, my kind of question is, where's he been? I know where he's been. But
concussion issues last year.
Yeah, but...
So can he catch anymore?
And that was kind of my ill-fated attempt at a question there. But
yeah. No, it's all good.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like, is he ready? Has he progressed? Because he hasn't played very much, and especially in the big leagues in the last, year and a half?
Well, I kind of feel like the way we'll look back on this is, how could the Twins not find more than 280 plate appearances for Josmiel Pinto in the 2 years they lost 90 games in each year? And this is a guy who hit 785 OPS, 11 home runs in under a half season of at-bats. I get that the catching isn't good, but neither was the team. Like you couldn't find room for a guy to play a little more. Instead, they're kind of ill-advised giving plate appearances to like Ryan Domit, Eric Fryer, Chris Herman, Rene Rivera at 1.2. It's like, could you have found room for Pinto before he went and got messed up this last season?
I always say this with relievers too. Like, why are they giving so much to like Blaine Boyer? And I understand why Aaron Thompson.
But Michael Tonkin could have pitched a lot more this year.
And that's what I was saying. Like, I understand Tonkin doesn't like hold runners, and it's his fastball is the only really solid major league pitch he has. But why aren't you developing those guys? And I understand some of these guys like Jake Reed and Nick Birdie weren't ready, although I think they've shown progress, right, in the Arizona Fall League and stuff like that.
I think they've both been very good in the Fall League.
But yeah, why aren't you getting young relievers in there, especially in games that you're not going to win, or before this seasons you knew that were kind of, because when I looked at it, 2 years ago, yeah, the bullpen looked really good. It also looked really old because Dunsing was aging and some of these other players.
Well, and now suddenly Burton. Tonkin's out of options, and you have no idea what he can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the Twins sometimes, for a team that really emphasizes youth and player development, will at times make confusing decisions putting veterans in. I understand, again, I just said you want incumbents in place, but sometimes overplaying veterans when, hopefully a guy like Murphy, again, is given that runway, or Tonkin or Birdie or whoever these young guys are.
I've always found it strange that they were married to relievers that just were nothing more than just average. It's just like if teams are interested in trading you prospects for them, even if they're low-level B- prospects, like smart teams take those trades. Otherwise you end up non-tendering a guy. Like Blaine Boyer was available because the Padres non-tendered him. A lousy Padres team decided they did not need Blaine Boyer for 2015, and yet he became a key cog in a bullpen for the Twins that was shaky. It was better than it had been in recent years, but it wasn't a bullpen that's going to make you forget about Juan Rincon and Jesse Crane and Joe Nathan from 10 years ago either.
Yeah, I think for this team to have success, those young guys have to. I understand that, again, it's not a copycat league. There's multiple ways to build bullpens, to build rosters, whatever. But I think you need your birdies. Like Tyler J is another guy. I think like you have to have these guys. And I understand we talked about this maybe on the last episode. You talked about how mentally it is very difficult to pitch in the major leagues. But I think you have to give these guys opportunity. You have to, at times, you have to almost let them fail. I think just to understand that, look, you turn the page the next day, and I think that's also a good lesson learned. So, in my mind, they have to have these guys that can throw throw gas coming out of the bullpen.
Well, and the other thing is with a bullpen, you need to have your frontline guys, which is going to be probably 2 guys. Then you have your 2 middle of the road guys. Then you have your cleanup crew, and your cleanup crew should be a couple of your young guys that you're trying to figure out what they are. And you run them out there consistently in games that don't matter to see if they can kind of progress to those in-between spots. And if they can't make those adjustments or you don't see some sort of progression in their development, you need to figure out
you dump
them
them as they get expensive, like the Twins did with Swarzak.
Yeah.
Where they just felt like paying him arbitration cost was not going to be worth it.
Well, and I mean, Swarzak's kind of a different one. I mean, he had one season where he was really good. The rest he was below average. Well, I mean, I don't think he had above or below 5 in those other seasons.
Right, yeah, he had a fine year as making like 100 innings worth of long relief appearances, basically.
Yeah, and
so we've talked about lost guys, missing guys that have kind of been forgotten about. There's 2 more that I think we should address. One to a lesser extent, that's Kenny Vargas. I think his situation is pretty much that he doesn't have a clear path to playing time above AAA. But the other one, a guy who had a really poor season at AAA Rochester this year, is Oswaldo Arcia. And, I feel like every time I bring him up, we feel like we forgot about him. We haven't talked about him. We haven't, and there's for good reason. I mean, he hit under 200 at Rochester. I think he had a feeling like he didn't belong there, and probably a gripe that he didn't. But at the same time, if there's no playing time in the big leagues for you, that's what happens. With Torrey Hunter retiring and with Aaron Hicks traded, if the Twins aren't serious about Miguel Sano playing left, moving Rosario to right, you could see a scenario where Arcia plays right field on a fair amount.
Oh,
and you're probably having, flashbacks of that. Probably sticks in your craw a little more than us as non-pitchers. But do you think there's a chance that he cracks spring training with the team? And I think he's out of options too. So another guy that just, what are you going to do with him?
I mean, obviously there's a chance, especially with him being out of options, but I don't even see how that's a warranted position because he's hit for some power, and that's kind of been his only thing.
And a guy that young, like 23, slugging 450 or whatever he did 2 years ago, that doesn't happen that often. So there is some power there. You're absolutely right.
But the other thing, the thing that I look at it is that he's hitting for power, but I mean, what's his consistent major league batting average? I mean, it's like right around 200, isn't it?
He reminds me of a post-knee Jason Kubel a little bit, where there's just not that much value because the defense is just so bad. There's some the bat can play, but as a
sometimes.
the bat can play as a DH because you're not playing the field, but you can't hit lefties, and it's some power, some doubles, but it's like, what are you sacrificing to get this guy in the lineup?
And that's my biggest gripe on him is that he's a younger player and his speed is marginal. His fielding ability in the outfield is kind of scary.
That's not going to get better as he gets older.
No, yeah, and
you need to start at the top and decline, not start at the bottom and decline. Like
yeah. So that's why. I mean, it's obviously you can see a situation where he might be in the outfield on opening day, but it's my view is. I mean, what's going on where this has happened?
I think there's a fairly good chance, though, that the opening day bench next year is Murphy or Suzuki catching, the other one on the bench, and then Nunez, Santana, and Arcia.
Yeah.
Like, that's a decent bench. I don't know if you need a fifth guy. They like to go with more on the pitching side to start the season, I think, just in case they get into a bind. Hopefully they won't, but they have plenty of pitchers. I think that the pitching depth on this team is more than the position player depth from a 25-man standpoint. But it wouldn't stun me if that's what the bench looked like going into next year.
No, yeah, I mean, I could see it too.
Because then you got Santana that can play short and center. It's not ideal. Don't get me wrong. It's not where you want to be, but sometimes when you've got those 40-man implications, it's just what you got to do.
With a guy like Arcia, I think he's probably more valuable on a different team that's more platoon-oriented.
Yeah, but what happens if he goes to, like, Oakland?
Yeah.
And they play him in right field against right-handed pitchers, and he hits 30 home runs.
But that's what I'm saying. I think maybe the Twins, I talked earlier in the show, it's nice that they're moving towards build up a guy and then get some value for them if they feel like they're expendable, right?
This feels like the opposite of that.
Yeah, no, and I understand what you're saying, but I guess if you put him in the outfield, this is the direction I'm going in. You're maybe trying to build up his value early in the season, trying to deal him, and then kind of maneuver, because especially if a Trevor Plouffe on your team starting this season, that may be a guy they move actually at the deadline, saying, okay, we need this piece.
There's a lot of value in July, too, when teams are in desperate need of players.
My thing there is at what cost are you doing that? Not with Plouffe, of course, but with Arcia. You may be building up some value. Maybe some other team takes a flyer on him and gives you a better player than you would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
Especially if it would be nothing.
But you could just bottom out, too.
Well, the other thing, too, is you screw up your pitchers. You just mentioned that. Like, how much more comfortable do you feel if you have an outfield that literally anything that goes in that direction gets caught?
How weird is it that Phil Hughes had his better year with the worst outfield, though?
That's kind of interesting.
Serendipity.
But baseball is a funny game, and those things happen all the time.
The second you think you know baseball, it just throws three curveballs in a row, and you're walking back.
Yep, exactly.
So I'm trying to think of what I wanted to go into next. Do you guys agree with me, no matter how you slice it, that Oswaldo Arcia isn't long for the Twins organization, regardless of if he makes the team out of spring training? I don't see him as a guy spending 5 more years with the Twins.
If I were the GM, he probably would have been gone a season or two ago.
Yeah, I mean, the value would have been really high then, too.
Yeah, I mean, just because I with what the Twins have as their hallmarks for pitching and fielding.
How about home ballpark too?
Yeah,
that spacious park. You need outfielders that can go.
Yeah,
get it.
he just doesn't fit in to the team and the organization with how they like to tell everyone about what kind of team they are and historically have been. He's just not really a fit. I think he's going to be way better served with some other organization.
I think that's right. And I think that's the thing. Twins fans are going to have a hard time with this, like they will with Hicks, because I think if it's not the Yankees, I think Hicks will have success with some other
But could
team.
this be the second coming of Gomez and Ortiz? I mean, that's obviously reaching, and Gomez needed a lot of time in Milwaukee to become a star. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't flip the switch, boom, Carlos Gomez is who Carlos Gomez is. But the fact of the matter is for Arcia, he's younger than people think he is. And there's the power. Like the power, if you just say, hey, look, kid, you're going to play DH, and we're just going to give you X number of plate appearances and just let you go to town, he could figure it out. Or maybe like the Phillies, who stink, granted, don't have the DH option, but they put him in right field. They just let Dominic Brown go, non-tendered him or whatever. You know, he was a guy that was going to get paid a little bit more money too. They might have a hole in right field where they just give the guy a chance. You know, how much does that have to play into your evaluation, or is it just kind of like, look, it is what it is if you're Terry Ryan?
I don't think you can sit there and try to foresee all the other outcomes of a specific player is going to play into some other team's role. You need to look at him right now, what he's done in the past, and what you might think he might do in this future season. And if it doesn't work into what your plans and views are, gots to go.
Yeah, there's a finite number of years, roster spots, all that stuff that you have to deal with that you can't really worry about the future.
And that's the thing. If you have a good team, fans won't care. You know, honestly, if their outfield's good and Hicks and Arcia are blowing up somewhere else, the reason why people complained is because you didn't have a shortstop forever, and J.J. Hardy was doing really well. You didn't have a catcher when Mauer got injured, and Wilson Ramos was killing it or whatever. That's when people care.
Ramos had a poor year for the Nationals this year. You don't hear people talking about that too much.
Yeah,
no.
And so they care if your team is not good, and so the Twins just need to take care of their own shop, kind of.
All right, so let's go around the horn as we come to a close for the 16th episode of The Breakdown. Tom, Cole, and then I'll finish it up. What would your offseason look like from beginning to end if you were building this team moving into next year? You can do whatever you want, and you can change moves that have already happened. How would your offseason look moving into next year?
I think if you want to make a statement, you go and get a player. You try to get Cespedes.
Like
you try
a big,
to get
big,
Hayward.
big...
And I understand that they have this mammoth Mauer contract. What I go back to is they were like the 24th payroll in baseball or something, $108 million. Most teams are spending in that range.
Yep.
I understand the Pirates and some of these other teams aren't, but they're younger teams that eventually will have to.
You don't need any more middling players either. I mean, that's no disrespect to like a Trevor Plouffe, but you don't need 4 more Trevor Plouffes, but you could really use one Cespedes, Hayward, Greinke, Price. I'm not saying that makes sense for this Twins team necessarily, but get something you don't have already.
Yeah, and the other thing too is then if you kind of go on in the bargain bin or whatever, you end up putting yourself in a bind, kind of like what they have with the pitching. I think Hughes will be good. I see him somewhere between an ace and a number 2. I don't think he's a true ace.
He does need a rebound, though.
Yeah, he does need a rebound. But you have, and I know he got hurt, and there's a lot of factors here, but you have Nolasco. You've already spent money on Nolasco and Santana. A lot of people have pointed this out. If you don't have those 2 guys, you maybe could go spend money on Price or something like that. I mean, right. I think, and there's no guarantee Price will be good into his later years or whatever. There's a lot. Being a GM is difficult, but I think you're right. You make a splash. You make a statement saying, I've seen enough here. Mulder's done enough from a managerial standpoint. We've seen enough from Snow and some of these players, these young guys, Rosario, that if we really inject a good veteran in here into the locker room, we can make that playoff push. I think that's something they need to do this year.
Since the Hicks move has happened, I totally agree. You got to go out and get someone who can anchor down that outfield because there's too many unknowns that are kind of floating around out there. You got to do that. We've got kind of the backup who might be the starting catcher right now. So I think a lot of the moving pieces that were moving before are kind of getting a little bit more solidified. Mm-hmm. And I think we just need one more quality bullpen guy, and I think we're gonna have a pretty good team next year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think I kind of have a hybrid philosophy, and we'll see if I can stick to it. Yeah, I don't think the Twins need any more of the take a flyer on a guy. I wanted them to sign Colby Rasmus last year, and that panned out pretty well for the Astros. They will get compensation when he signs elsewhere. But I don't think the Twins need to be digging for that because from a positional standpoint, you just don't really have room for a guy to kind of shoehorn in there and look for someone who can kind of fulfill their promise. You don't need any more starting pitching unless you clear out that log jam, whether you trade a Kyle Gibson or something like that. I think if it were me, and I wouldn't have traded Hicks, but what's done is done, and I can make peace with that. I would go all out to sign Hayward. You don't get 26-year-olds on the free agent market very often. If he wants a 10-year deal, I'd really push for 8. 8 is still crazy, absurdly long. Like literally, we'll be electing maybe another president or 2 in the time frame that he's on the market.
One thought with that, Mauer's deal was 8. Imagine if his was 10, because actually that makes a difference, right? Yeah. Mauer's is off the book by the time you would have to pay Sano or Buxton.
And you could structure a mega deal for Hayward in a way where if you were to sign him, and again, yes, I am all in on Hayward. You could structure it where it's a little bit lighter until Mauer's comes off the payroll, and you'd be fine. It's a guy that plays great defense. Free agents at that age don't come along. It's literally taking a franchise cornerstone chip and pulling it out of thin air. And for me, the pitching available, there are options, but it's just too much risk in pitching for me to give $100 million to any pitcher. Mm-hmm. And it's not because Zach Greinke isn't amazing, because he's thrown a bunch of innings, and he might stay healthy till he's 40, and it'll just be like, holy cow, this guy was the epitome of durability. David Price might do the same thing. But if he doesn't, you're back where you started. With Hayward, with a position player, I think you've got a little bit more stability. You're also not pushing aside guys who otherwise deserve a chance to play. So I'm going balls to the wall with a superstar, and then I'm signing one of the higher-end relievers, whether it's a Tyler Clippard or a Joakim Soria, to a 3-year deal, and then letting the bullpen just kind of filter in, a lot more minor league signings like they usually do, get their Jared Burtons or Casey Fiends. But I think you've got enough help coming up through the minors that you can fill out a pretty doggone good bullpen, without having to go crazy and sign 2 or 3 relievers, which it was never sane to begin with.
they also don't have a lot of room in the rotation. Like I think Trevor May should be in the rotation, and I
Yeah.
don't know how he fits in because you have 3 guys you spend money on, and you have Tyler Duffy who deserves a chance, and some of these other
Right.
guys. Yeah.
So it's going to be crowded. They might make some moves too. I might trade Tommy Malone. I might consider trading Kyle Gibson. The value is high on Kyle Gibson right now, and he's not as young as people think. Ultimately, I think you're going to have a very different team going into 2016, but you do need to make a couple moves to avoid backsliding back under 500. Again, close to 500, don't get me wrong. But you need to make a couple aggressive moves for a division that's here for the taking.
Amen.
Thoughts?
There we go.
All right, guys. That's going to be a wrap for episode number 16. It's been a slow week in Twins territory. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's going to do it. For producer Aaron, for Tom Schreier, Cole DeVries, this is Brandon Warren saying thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a few weeks after Thanksgiving. Be safe and be well.